All right, the conversation now with a couple people from the show, some behind-the-scenes people. And now that the show is a year old, I thought I'd introduce you to some of the people that work behind the scenes that have helped in putting the show up and keeping it going over the last 12 months. On my left, to your nowhere, is Keith Conrad. He is let me call him the technical producer. You might not know this, but the opening is made in China and then is shipped to the United States, and then Keith assembles everything and puts it up every day. So that's one of the things he does. And calling in from Las Vegas is George Bliss. He is the technical wizard that really keeps all the moving parts moving. And
You're
without his,
right, Gary.
you're damn right is right.
Go. Get ready to have a good time. This is exciting, isn't it?
Yes.
That's your opening.
That's the opening.
That's a great opening.
All right, here we go. This is exciting, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Two.
Yes, it is.
And George has been so invaluable as far as when something is a glitch, it is not a glitch after we talk to George. So he would be a major cog in this routine every day, or at least every other week, it seems. But actually, after we got going, there hasn't been too much technically that has been a problem. And you have a background in this. That's why I brought you on board, because you know all this stuff. And let me start with you, George. First of all, you live in Chicago, but you're in Las Vegas because you're in one of the Cirque shows. You're an acrobat part-time.
Yeah, and I'm also going to fill in for one of the Elvis impersonators tonight at the Mirage Hotel, so I have to be cool with my voice. Gary, what amazes me is today is the 144th episode, and that's one gross, 12 times 12. It's one good gross, buddy. Can you believe 144, not including your special stuff?
On the day
oh my goodness.
We're recording this, yes, we have hit that 144th show. That's just the free
12
shows.
times 12.
And then you add all the premium shows in, and we're well over 200 shows for the year, which I'm not saying that's heavy lifting. I'm just saying when something's new, you don't know how it's going to go. And I'm just so honored and humbled that we've made the 12-month mark and we'll continue going at the breakneck speed that we have been going, and maybe even faster. And, George, what is your background?
I don't know exactly, but when I was 9 years old, my father got me interested in ham radio. So I became an amateur radio operator at a very, very young age. And in those days, it was almost impossible to get a license. So I learned Morse code, and I worked with transmitters and receivers and antenna systems. And then much later, after college, I started with subsidiaries of IBM Corporation, and we were really at the forefront. Can you believe this, Gary? I'm old. They didn't even have PCs when I started at IBM. We rolled out the PC as we know it today in the 1982 timeframe. I remember a PC then was $5,000. And then much later, the revolution came where you can buy a tablet now for $100, and it's incredible. Like, for instance, I'm talking right now on a thing called an iPhone. There's something like 1 billion of them on the face of the earth. I'm talking on a thing the size of a cigarette package to you, and it's pure, clean audio from anywhere in the world. So I could be in Boca Raton, Florida now, or I could be in Caracas, Venezuela. And the same thing with you, Gary. This incredible podcasting that has taken hold of this country is just in the beginning. And thank God you're one of the original guys to do this correctly, because when I look back at what you've done, your very first episode was so cool. It was called Concealed Gary. And then your second one was, guess what? The Trump rally in Chicago. But the third one got my incredible interest. That was the great Howard Stern, the king of all media. So you've gone full boat on this whole podcast. And the beauty is anybody anywhere in the world with a little cell phone can listen to you 24/7, and it's going to get better, if you can believe it, Gary.
And
it's incredible.
As George said, you can do this anywhere. And right now I am in Colombia because I'm a drug mule part-time.
You Medellin guy, you El Chapo.
I just do it for fun. I don't have any other, I don't really do it for the money. I do it for fun. Also joining the program, and I want to actually ask you, George, later why you're in Vegas, because I'm a kid, but you're in Vegas for a reason. And you're not that old of a man. You're in your 60s. 60's the new 57.
Of course, 68 to be exact. So
you're not that old.
I'm already 3 years past my Social Security level. Can you believe it?
The man's still working, and that's one of the reasons he's in Vegas. But first, let me talk to Keith Conrad here. Keith and I met when we got together for my last AM radio show, and Keith was my producer on that program. And then when that got pulled, Keith went off and did some other stuff. But then when I started to do this, we went back to Keith for his expertise. Because, Keith, let me start with where you started in this business and where you're at now.
Well, that's kind of a long story because, like George, my dad comes from a technical background. He's literally a rocket scientist. When I was in high school, he worked on the Athena launch vehicle for Lockheed.
Cool.
That put the Lunar Prospector in orbit around the moon. So he literally put something around the moon when I was in high school. So I was always kind of in that tech mindset. And my mom tells a story that when I was about 4 or 5, my brother was going to school and I was in kindergarten and it only went a half day. So I would go with her to pick him up in the afternoon. And she said I would just throw a fit if we didn't have Spike O'Dell on because he was doing afternoons at the time.
And who is that? Explain to the audience.
Well, he was on he was in on the radio in Chicago for probably 25 years.
At least, yeah.
And so it's almost sort of coincidental that I ended up going into radio, but I think according to her, she would say that it was kind of
because you wanted to listen to this guy every day as a young one.
Yeah.
You were fascinated by what this guy had to say.
Way younger than anybody else was listening to talk radio.
Do you remember one thing that he said that really caught your attention and then that made you want to listen more often? Usually there's one thing that grabs you and then you become hooked.
I don't...
Was it the fact that he painted barns? And I don't mean painted the barn. I mean, he was a painter of barns.
Of barns, yeah.
Right, that was his hobby.
There's not one thing that jumps out to mind, but...
was it when he said the air and water show in Chicago is exactly what it is, an air and water show?
It's exactly...
That's what caught me.
Yeah, it delivers what it promises.
You know why they call it an air and water show? Because that's what it is.
What it is.
Stuff like that would hook me.
Yeah, but it just... It seemed like everybody there was having a good time, and that was something I wanted to be a part of. When I was thinking, what could my career be? I wanted to do something like that.
I think you and I connect totally on that because that's why I got into radio. When I would listen to these guys on the air, I thought, wow, they get paid for doing that? That sounds like a good time. I want to do that. And that was what grabbed me. And then some other stuff that people were saying, I thought, oh, I like the way that guy sounds. I like what he says. But now that's not the case, Keith. That's when you listen, you go, boy, I'm glad I don't do that for a living, isn't it? Although you're still in that part of the business. Both George and Keith have other lives in addition to helping me with this program. And Keith works for a radio show in Chicago.
Well, what's funny is, when I talk to people, when people ask me about what I do for a living and everything, and they find out that I work in radio, they think of Rush Limbaugh and things like that. And that, he's had a lot of success. Let's not take anything away from him. But, that's never the sort of thing that I wanted to do. Like, I never wanted to be an opinion column on the radio or even be a part of that.
You didn't want to be on the air.
No. I think that even before it existed, before this internet world existed, I would have said, down the road, what I want to do is I want to make, standalone content that's, rather than being like a 3-hour show, but just, little standalone pieces of content.
Which is pretty much the template for what goes on the internet these days. You don't really hear 3-4 hour long shows like you do on AM and FM. These are more concise and packed in there and put out that way because the content is all together. It's not where you have to sit through a format wheel, as it's called.
Yeah.
Did you hear that on Spike Show, the format wheel?
I heard
Bet you did.
That once or twice. But that's the nice thing about this day and age is it seems like what everybody's looking for as far as content is sort of it's gradually getting
very specialized.
Exactly what I want to be doing.
And George, you broadcast too.
I sure do, but guess what? Wayne Newton just walked by me. So I did a lot of engineering part-time with a sports station for many years in Chicago. But, what Keith is talking about, we're all talking about here, is terrestrial radio, which is dead and has been dead for 5 years.
George, you're bitter
So let
now.
me explain to the listeners what the heck I'm talking about. So this morning, if I wanted to listen to Keith's radio show, I couldn't do that. I'm in Las Vegas. I'm more than 70 miles away from the transmitter. The beauty of the internet is I could move right now to Argentina and hear the Garry Meier show. This is the beauty of podcasting in the internet, because there's no restrictions on the distance that we can listen. So I've always said for the last 3 to 5 years, terrestrial radio is way, way, way on its last leg. It has a few good things. Maybe you can listen to the weather real quickly in your local town. But going forward...
Because you can't get that anywhere else.
And I read today that Facebook is going to start broadcasting all the NBC news broadcasts. So why the hell do you need a television? You could be on your little Palm Pilot and watch NBC News anywhere in the world. So, Gary, the beginning is still the beginning. It's going to get bigger and bigger, and you're right at the forefront of all of this.
And you need to watch television, just to tell you why, so the government can spy on you. That's
Correct.
what they use your television now. They're listening to your conversations because there's a microphone on the television they can turn on whenever they want. Keith
it's no secret that the reason why this gentleman, whatever his name is, Trump, the guy that owns these big buildings, won the presidency, he did it exactly the same thing we're doing today. He's tweeting, he's on Facebook, he's using text messaging. Can you imagine the change of the accepted way to politic in this country? The guy tweets at 5 o'clock in the morning, the president of the United States. Guess what? It's going to get bigger. So this podcasting thing, I'm really excited to be part of it, because we haven't even touched the beginning of what we can do. Gary, I hope to see you on Facebook soon, because they are expanding their wavelengths, and we want to see Garry Meier's handsome face, okay? Because your fans are out there and they want to call in and they want to see what's happening, and that's yet to be determined. But there's so many things that Keith and I are working on that there's a big future in the whole situation here.
One of the ongoing comments that I do get back from listeners is that they would like to have that phone-in aspect, and
Sure.
George and Keith and I, as George has mentioned, have been talking about that, and actually we've gone through a couple of simulations of doing that, and that is one of the goals I have as we enter the second year of this program, to bring the callers in and then maybe do some live shows once in a while. This is all possible, and I'm willing to do it. I just want to take it step by step. And one of the other things you mentioned is Keith's show. Keith has his own podcast, too.
Yes, he does. And I even have a little sports show called George Bliss Radio. I don't do it all the time, but occasionally I'll do an amateur sporting event or a high school sporting event. And how the heck are you going to get it? You're going to get it on the internet because of the way it delivers worldwide in 1 second or less. It's absolutely incredible.
What do you do on your show, Keith?
Well, my podcast is called Geek Counter Geek, and it's on
Geek Counter Geek.
Yeah, Radio Misfits podcast network, so radiomisfits.com. And then it's pretty easy to find after that. But we tackle like really hard-hitting questions like, is Kirk or Picard better, the better captain? And this week
it is geeky, isn't it?
It is. This week, because SpaceX announced that a couple of rich fat cats are going to pay for a trip to the moon, we started talking about if something goes wrong with that, like what do you actually, like, if you're NASA, do you like make an effort to go try to save these people, or are they just on their own? And then we were talking about the movie The Martian, which is basically, I don't know that NASA would actually go after the guy.
I think, right, you sign a waiver. If this goes wrong, you're on your own, because we can't really go get you.
Because, like, on Apollo 13, they were already on a mission to the moon. So all they had to do was pay some overtime. You know, it didn't really hit them.
They didn't have to do anything extra. This was already on the clock.
Yeah. In The Martian, they're launching, extra rockets. They're doing all sorts of things.
Otherwise, Keith, the movie would have been 35 minutes long.
That's true. Yeah, but
because he gets up there, he's stuck. The end.
In real life, I think NASA would be like, well, we'll move up the next mission a little bit, and if you can get there, great.
Right. If you're still alive, great. If not, well, that's going to be the case when they send the first batch of people to Mars. That's a one-way ticket. First of all, how can you sit in a capsule for 6 months? That's the ride, right? It's 6 months to get there.
Yeah, they're thinking that they could shorten that. But
with the technology that they'll have at the time?
Yeah, but it's still going to be months.
I really complain after a 4-hour plane ride. So for that reason, I'm out. George, you are working in a different sector in addition to your technology base that you have. What has been your job for all these years?
In the last 14 years, I was with the very famous Berkshire Hathaway Corporation. No, not the guys that have Geico Insurance or Dairy Queen, the corporate entity out of Omaha, Nebraska that owns over 3,000 companies. Sadly, at age 68, they did hire a younger guy that I trained, and they were very nice about it. They let me go after my 14th year, but I will never say a negative thing about the great Berkshire Hathaway Corporation. They paid me well. They gave me good insurance. They gave me a good separation. So I'm out in Las Vegas right now looking for a job at a trade show. And I'm doing so far so good. I've met some pretty good people. And I'm going to keep working, Gary, because I've been out of work technically for about 2 weeks, and I'm already going nuts. I can understand now why you, a legend in radio, in the Radio Hall of Fame, et cetera, wanted to do this because it's fun, it's what you do, and it bides the time, and it makes you happy. I understand totally now. I can't be idle, and neither can you, Gary. That's for sure.
And this convention you're at, it's of all the different construction companies
Construction companies, yeah, from Volvo Corporation to the great Caterpillar tractor to Komatsu to every John Deere tractor on earth. It's outdoors at Las Vegas, and there's billions of dollars of equipment here, and I've met some nice people already from a Japanese company. It's just unbelievable. Gary, I wanted to mention something very quickly about this technology, if I could. You know, if I wanted to go listen to episode 122, we're on episode 145 or so right now, how do you do that? Well, your organization developed this incredible thing called the Garry Meier app. Nice app. And guess what, folks, if you're listening? It's free, Free. Any iPhone in the world, you go to the App Store and type in 2 words, Garry Meier, and download the app. And that app lists all of the episodes from 1 right up to 145. Let's say I want to listen to an episode 2 months ago. I go on the app. It has it like a library table. I touch episode number 1, 2, 3, and up comes the Garry Meier Show. Let's say you get a phone call. Put it on pause, run it back 30 seconds, and listen. People just do not understand the incredible nature of what you've set up here with your app store, which again is available on all Android devices at the Google Play Store. Everybody knows what that is. And of course, I'm an Apple guy. I'm on the Apple App Store. You can get Garry Meier on iTunes. You can go back. It's all there. What radio show can you pick up 10 months ago, the Rush Limbaugh show? You can't even find it, okay? But you can find the show, Gary, that you came on 6 months ago. Stop it, play it, listen to it. Everything is here on this Garry Meier podcast. And your people have done an incredible job setting up your whole situation, and it's going to get way better. I can tell you that for sure.
Let me explore that point you made about, say, a Rush Limbaugh. They don't archive those shows on the internet?
Right.
They don't? I don't know that at all.
How do you find them? How do you find, it's hard to do. You have to have a big laptop. It's a big pain in the butt. But your shows are all listed very contently, very nicely, and you even have a title to all your shows, like Concealed Gary, which is one of my favorites of all time. If you say, hey, go back to the Trump rally show, hey, that's episode 2. You go right to it and listen to it. And you can start and stop it. So you're way ahead of terrestrial radio when it comes to technology.
Well, I certainly...
Eons ahead.
George, I was not a pioneer in this.
Get a little bit more onto their iPhones and start listening to the Garry Meier Show.
There have been people out there, your Adam Carollas, your Mark Marins, who have been doing this for years. So I'm not by any means a pioneer. And I do appreciate what they started, because when they started, it was a lot more complicated than it is today. But the shows, and we're using Rush Limbaugh as an example, those shows, his show is 3 hours every day on AM radio. Those shows really aren't designed for the internet. Those shows are designed for AM and FM, and that's the length of the format that they have, 3-4 hours. These shows that we put together, they're more streamlined for what this is. So even if they wanted to put those shows on, that's 3 hours of shows that they'd have to extract probably the commercials and all the other stuff to get it down to probably an hour and a half or whatever. And you're right, it probably, not that Rush couldn't afford it, but he probably, doesn't want to archive these shows, or that's the way it's meant to be listened to live. That's fine. That's their platform. This is a show that is in your control. You listen to it whenever you want to listen to it. It's like television. It's all time shifted now. You watch shows not necessarily when they air, but when you have time to watch those shows or when you have time to listen to the show. I know a lot of people say, well, when I take a road trip, I stockpile a number of your shows, and then I can listen to them all the way through my trip. Another good way.
Exactly.
And that's the beauty of this, the flexibility factor.
But even that,
and you like to travel. You like to go East Coast, West Coast, South Coast. I mean, your studio is portable, and you cannot tell the difference. I mean, you listen to the great Leslie Kiley, who's your news girl. I mean, my goodness, it's fantastic. You go back and you listen. It's as if it is a professional $4 million studio, and it's probably better than that $4 million studio. This whole thing, I don't want to sound too crazy. It's so exciting, and there's so much more to think about what you could do with the Garry Meier show. It's just going to go on and on and on. And we are in the baby stages.
Yeah,
that's it.
It's embryonic at this point.
You were talking about how Limbaugh isn't necessarily made for the internet, and you're right, because even if you do archive his shows, there's going to be things that Rush Limbaugh talks about, or things that he says that you don't really care about. And I think audiences these days, they're really sort of narrowed into this is exactly what I want to listen to. And so when you have a show that's like 3 hours and you're covering just a huge amount of material, people aren't necessarily going to listen to that in the way that they listen to podcasts.
Well, and that show is our example, our stepping off point, is a very topical show. So, and politics these days changing by the hour. So a show that he did even 2 weeks ago can seem very dated, in that the stuff I cover, and as you've heard, and this has always been my game plan, I really stay away from politics because it gives me a headache at this point, and it's very divisive. I have comments here and there, but overall, let the Rush Limbaughs and Sean Hannitys do that. That's their game. I look at the world and think there are a lot of other crazier things going on, and I focus on those and point out what we're seeing as far as other stuff that enters our lives every day.
Hey, Gary, those shows are broadcasts. Your show is a performance, and that's the difference. It's the talent level. It's the interest. You're going to listen to Garry Meier 2 or 3 times. I swear to you, I would never listen to Rush Limbaugh more than once, okay?
Well,
and
again,
that's another thing
he's done extremely well. He's found his niche and he's filled it, and you can't blame anybody for doing that. That's all everything is. Find a niche and fill it. Correct. And that's what he found. There was a fever to cover politics the way he covers it, and he does it. And he makes a lot of money doing it, and that's what it always has been, to find your niche and fill that niche as well as you can every day. And I found a niche that I think suits me, and that's what I do. Right? That's what I do. Thank you. So what Keith does, the opening of the show, I tape that, and then I send that to my friend Duffy, and then he puts all the bells and whistles in there, and then he sends that to Keith, and then Keith, it's like a Frankenstein monster. He puts the head on it, and then he posts the show every day and makes sure everything's copacetic before it goes out.
And this is all done with relatively simple computers, Apple computers, a couple pieces of minor software for audio recording, a couple microphones that are not in the millions of dollars range, and it sounds so professional. And that's what fascinates me about the whole situation. The ability to move Garry. You might go to Los Angeles for a vacation. Doesn't matter. That email goes back to Keith. He edits it. And by the way, he is one of the greatest audio editors I've ever met. The guy is so fast on his feet. He's adept at what he does. And the whole thing comes together in 5 minutes. What TV or radio show does that happen on? It takes hours for these guys to sit in meetings and decide what they're going to do, what they're going to edit, what they're going to cut. Not on this show. This is leading technology right here. It's simple, it's fun, and it's effective.
Well, so when this started, decided to revisit with Keith, and you're right, George, as far as editing and whatever I need him to do, he's lightning fast. In the old days, for those of us who came up with recording tape, editing was you had the reel-to-reel tape, And then if you wanted to take something out or put something in, you took a grease pencil and you marked it on the tape by the playback head. And then you took a razor blade and you cut that tape. And then you spliced it back together and hoped for the best. Sometimes you hit it. Sometimes it sounded like crap. But with digital, you look at the scope on the screen, right? And you find the edit. And you can take a breath out or a word. It's very precise. It's very surgical. And that's what Keith does.
Yeah, and when I started in college, the radio station that I was working at, they had already switched to digital, so there were reel-to-reel tape machines around and everything. But I never, they were never something that I used on a day-to-day basis. But I will say probably the funniest story that I have from college is while I was in school, I was working at a radio station in town. Not the college radio station, but the a cluster that had like a top 40 station and a talk station and everything. And one of my first jobs, like one of the first things I had to edit was Casey Kasem's top 40. And literally because this is Alabama, I had to take out certain artists that the owner of the radio station,
for example,
decided that they didn't want.
Like what artists? Let me before you say anything, I'm gonna guess a lot of black artists had to go.
The urban artists.
The
had to
urban
go.
art. That's
yes.
the code for black artists.
That's what I was told.
Seriously, you had to cut out all the black. How would you do a countdown show if parts are missing?
Well, what they would have me do is they'd have Casey introduce the song, and then I would just take the hook of the song and cut everything else out. So they did acknowledge that the song was there, but they had me take out the bulk of it.
And let me share with people what era we're talking about. It sounds like it's 300 years ago. When was this?
This would have been about 2002.
There's a 2 in the first number. 2002, 15 years ago, and they're still doing this in the South.
Yeah, not anymore.
Really?
I
not
don't
anymore.
Think. But that's mostly because
Right.
Casey Kasem's
when they didn't have their own drinking fountains, that's when everything started to break down. Take out all those black artists. I want to hear that jungle music. Jeez, that's frightening.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, George, you got any stories to match that?
Well, I do. As a matter of fact, that's another reason why podcasting and the Garry Meier Show is head and shoulders above traditional broadcasting, because we can say what we just said. If you did something on a terrestrial station, oh, no, they'd edit it out. We can't talk about that. On internet, let's be clear, you can use any language you want. There's no restrictions. There are sometimes many four-letter words used, but that's the American dream, This goes on. Nobody can tell our crew what to say, what to edit, how to put it down, who to not include, etc. That's another whole situation where this is a superior medium for sure.
That's George's bumper sticker, the American dream, to use the F-bomb whenever you want on the air. As
it's true, Gary. I mean, there's no editing or no censorship on the internet, and that's a powerful tool.
But as you know from listening to this program, I'm really not throwing the swears out there. I just think, just because I can. I do every now and then. It's very sparingly. But it's not something that I want to pepper the show with, because it sounds like I'm trying to be a poor man's Howard Stern or something, and that's not what I want to do. So that's why you don't hear that. It's family-friendly for the most part, depending on your family. And so I want to thank you guys. I just wanted to give a little taste of what happens with the people behind the scenes. So Keith Conrad, thank you for all your work this year. And George, again, good luck with your job search out in Vegas. Buddy. And these are two of the people, and there are several more that I'll be talking to, that have helped make this what it is for the last month.
And don't forget that Garry Meier app, right? Okay, on the App Store from Apple or Google Play, and listen to it to your heart's content. You'll love it.
I thank you for listening. Lick the schnauzer, take the cannoli. It's 3 in the green, the gear's down, flaps are down. And if you get a chance, sign up for the Tuesday, Thursday shows if you haven't. The Gear Force has landed.